Previously on the limitations of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is there still hope for the future of Marvel movies? I think so, but I can't answer that question alone. If we're gonna solve this thing, we have to get an actual superhero in here. We'll talk to them about these movies and figure out the future of this genre.
I've got the guy who plays the Tick's sidekick.
All right, we're in the end game now.
I wanna be an endgame. I wanna be first string. I wanna be a big team. I wanna be endgame.
So today, we have a special guest joining us. He is one of the stars of the Amazon original series The Tick, co-host of the podcast Blank Check with Griffin and David. Welcome, Griffin Newman, to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
What is your take on the current state of the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
It's weird. I mean, I've watched your videos on the subject, and I feel like we have a similar relationship with them, where it's like, these are the movies I thought I wanted to see my entire childhood, and I am constantly confused and trying to interrogate why I feel so conflicted about them. Mm-hmm. There are things that I love. I go see every one of them opening weekend.
Yep.
And I'm usually left with this weird feeling of emptiness at the end of it. But it's also one of these things, I mean, it's not just what they've done for superhero storytelling, but how the rest of the entertainment industry has followed their lead of how you want to do long-form serialized storytelling and franchise building and all that sort of stuff. And no one's doing it as well as them. So I kind of can't question what they're doing.
Yeah.
In a certain way, because everyone else is trying and failing, which shows how difficult it is to pull off. But, I wonder where we're ultimately going.
The question that I keep getting at is, like, with the model they've built, can they make a, like, really great movie? I mean, like, I said this before in a video, but, like, for me, my, like, high watermark when it comes to superhero movies is Spider-Man 2.
Yeah,
I'm just like, can they make a Spider-Man 2?
I don't know if they can make a movie that focused ever. There's something to, like, the storytelling simplicity of Spider-Man 2 in just sort of how streamlined it is, mm-hmm. and how sort of in touch with its themes it is and coherent it is, which I think that's a byproduct of, Sam Raimi has said he got a lot of freedom on that movie. He was surprised by how much freedom he got in the first Spider-Man movie, and because that worked, they gave him even more in the second one.
And it makes sense that they gave him way less on the third one?
Yes, exactly. That's how this industry works. I think there's that aspect which is hard to replicate, again, in a model that has so many overseers, and there's so much brand management at place. I mean, you want to talk about what works really well about the Marvel movies. I constantly come with this comparison to fast food restaurants and chain restaurants, where it's like, it is incredible that you can franchise something across the globe and maintain quality control. Mm-hmm. That you can go to France, or you can go to Boise, or you can go to, like, Namibia, and a Big Mac is pretty much going to taste the same. And someone at the top has to make sure that if they introduce a new menu item, it will taste pretty much the same anywhere you go.
Right.
Which is incredible. That shouldn't be possible. The negative is that sets a pretty low ceiling on how good any food item can be.
I think that's a pretty good analogy.
Because you're not allowing anyone to experiment anymore on the ground. You're allowing one person in a lab to create something that they know they can control. Mm-hmm. That will be super satisfying. There's a reason I always want to get fast food at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm drunk. There's a reason. and I feel so good when I'm eating it, and I feel a little crappy afterwards. And I feel that way with not just the Marvel movies, but with this sort of franchise-driven filmmaking of, we can't just make a movie that works on its own. The movie has to be a payoff for the movie that came before it and a teaser for the movie that's going to come next.
I mean, I feel like, there's a lot of talk about why, people don't go to the movies as much anymore, and
Right.
they're less likely to take a chance
Yeah.
on a new idea, and
Right.
and there's reason that the Marvel movies keep doing so well because they are a sure thing.
Yes, and that they've successfully built it into an event. I mean, I feel like the way that people watch Marvel movies is weirdly more similar to how people engage with sports, where it's like you talk to fans, and at this point, almost everyone is a fan of some faction of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Right.
There's this weird thing where you'll meet people and they'll be like, I just only like the Thor movies. And there are the people who are in on everything and love it, and the people who see them all out of obligation. But there's this feeling of, I just have to keep up to date with them. I don't want to miss a game because it's all feeding into a larger narrative of where we're going with the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't watch sports. And I think I was always kind of jealous of the sense of community that springs up around watching games as an event. Going to a bar where they support your home team, or your friends who you watch it with, or the person you're texting with as the game is going on, or any of that, and how much of it is what you bring to it. I've been a fan of this team forever. I know the narrative of this player who got drafted at this point and had this injury, and this is their comeback game. And the movies kind of ask you, the Marvel films at this point, to bring that sort of level to the films, but also to treat them as an event where it's about going the first weekend and wearing your shirt,
Yeah.
Who's your favorite character? And what do you think is going to happen? And what rumors have you read online? And are they going to be, checked off or not? And it's that sort of like the pre-gaming of like what you have to bring to the game, with these Avengers movies functioning as your sort of, World Series, your Super Bowls, your what have you.
Right.
But the weird thing is those movies are also now just tease up for the next season. There's never any sense of finality because it's like the thing has to keep going. You shift
Yeah.
out players,
Right.
You might change the stadium or you might change the uniforms, but it's like just about trying to get you to buy the season tickets.
I spent a whole lot of time here talking about the limitations of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's literally the title of these videos. I've explained how the requirements and demands of the ongoing universe restrict what the individual movies can do, how much control the filmmakers can have, and how their production system has led to a degree of homogeneity among the films. But it would be disingenuous to say there aren't positive aspects as well. What gets forgotten, especially with other studios attempting to copy what Marvel has done, is that the point of a cinematic universe isn't to make winking teases about future movies. It's to create new storytelling possibilities. It's so you can get The Avengers, a film that works because we already know and care about these characters from their previous solo stories. And in the 7 years since then, the two Marvel movies that I think best represent the potential of the MCU are Thor Ragnarok and Black Panther. Ragnarok, while a sequel, is essentially a standalone film, but it could never exist outside of the MCU. On one level, it does function as a regular Thor movie. It features Thor, Loki, Odin, Heimdall, and Asgard. But it also prominently features the Hulk, a character who previously had never appeared in the series and only ever interacted with Thor in the Avengers films. To accomplish a story development early in the movie, Doctor Strange makes an appearance. Since the audience is already familiar with him from his own movie, they don't need to spend time establishing a new character. Similarly, Black Panther is able to hit the ground running because the heavy lifting of introducing T'Challa, his backstory, and Wakanda was already taken care of in Civil War. There's no need for an origin story, and the film is able to tell a story that, in another franchise, would probably have to wait for a sequel. When the film needs a minor villain who has a history with Wakanda, they're able to use one with whom the audience also has a history. Claw, who played a minor role in Age of Ultron. Black Panther is a movie that would not be able to exist as it does without the MCU. It's essentially a spin-off, using several minor characters from earlier movies. These movies are the rare cases in which being a part of the MCU frees them to tell stories not possible without the larger universe. The potential of the MCU isn't to create obligations for each film to set something up or pay something off. It's to create new story possibilities. It gives storytellers this massive toolbox of characters and settings that have already been introduced, that they can use to create new stories. I assume that they're not going to, in Endgame, like straight up kill all of the original core characters.
No, 0% chance.
Right.
Right.
And so, but since this universe will continue for years to come,
Yeah.
it's just, why would it stop? The comics don't stop, the MCU won't stop. At some point, there's going to come a moment in time when they've got to bring back, like Tony Stark will appear again, or Steve Rogers will appear again, and they will have to recast. In the way of like maybe a new writer coming on after someone spent like 5 years like writing a series, there will have to be a new voice. And again, I'm not super optimistic, but I know that eventually has to happen, and I want to kind of like skip ahead to whenever it happens to see what it is.
See, I question whether it will ever happen, and I don't know if it's just wishful thinking on my part, but the idea that excites me the most about the future of the universe is if they get to that point and choose not to recast. Because there's this
And
thing
just
in the
have them
comics,
age?
or just pass down these titles. I mean, they're never going to stop running out of characters to introduce.
Right.
What excites me, and is something that the comics, aren't forced to do, there's constantly shakeups. There's constantly characters dying and then coming back to life. And you go to the Wikipedia entry for any Marvel character, and you find out, 5 different characters have actually held that title at different points in time.
Right.
But they eventually always reset. Captain America will come back to life, or he'll thaw out of the ice, or he'll leave, the cave he's been living in and reclaim the shield. Because it doesn't cost any money to hire someone new to write and someone new to draw Captain America.
Right.
They can just take him off the bench.
Yeah.
But Chris Evans will age and will not want to do these movies anymore, whether it's at the end of Endgame or whether it's at the end of the 6-picture deal. We'll realize he signed after Endgame. Either way, he can't do these forever. But the question is the Marvel brand so strong that unlike something like Batman, where we constantly need someone to be playing Batman, you can't just have each new iteration of Batman be a pass down of the past, take on Batman. Could we get to a scenario in which Captain America is always part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but he's never Steve Rogers again, where he does become Bucky, or Sam Wilson, or any of the other characters who have played Captain America, or the characters who haven't played Captain America yet, you know? Because the universe is bigger than any one character at this point, and the characters are bigger than any one. Or let me say this, the iconography of the characters and what they represent is bigger than the actual specific characters in so many ways. That a lot of people have talked about how you can kind of see, okay, so is Black Panther going to be the new Captain America?
Right.
And is Doctor Strange the new Iron Man? And is Captain Marvel sort of the new Thor?
Yep.
Are they replacing the sort of key original Avengers with analogs in terms of personality types and power sets and even facial hair and whatever, kind of one-to-one, people with nationalistic senses of pride, whatever it is. But what excites me the most is the idea that whenever Robert Downey Jr. stops playing Iron Man, Tony Stark is done.
Right.
And the universe goes on for however many decades it goes on until, all the ice caps melt. But Iron Man will always be a constant, and Tony Stark will always be a guy we reference as a past.
Right.
And you're moving forward the way that actual TV does, something like ER does, where it's like, well, when that actor has a contract that can't be met, they leave and they come in with 2 new doctors.
And
you're maintaining a sort of balance.
Right.
But, maybe George Clooney comes back from the finale.
Yeah.
Maybe Noah Wyle does like a couple episode arc, but...
And that's what's interesting to me, because while in so many ways they've been trying to replicate comic book storytelling, this could be the point where, like... It's
they
really
deviate.
That
That becomes an actual sense of finality, of chapters ending and new chapters starting that would be exciting to me.
Yeah.
Like, I would be thrilled if Robert Downey Jr. said, I will never do another one no matter how much they pay me.
Yeah.
Not because I'm tired of him being in them, because I want to see what they do if they can't pull him in.
Right.
You know, if he doesn't exist as an option. And what my prayer is that they don't just pay Bradley Cooper $20 million to grow a goatee.
Right now, Marvel is the biggest, most influential force in media. They created and perfected the cinematic universe, the thing every other studio is trying to copy. But now they're in an interesting position to continue innovating modern cinematic storytelling. For years, Marvel has had TV shows that are technically part of the MCU. There's the Netflix shows Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Runaways, Cloak and Dagger, but since none of these shows are overseen by Kevin Feige and they're produced by a different branch of Marvel Entertainment, the films have pretty much ignored them, and they feel like they're off in their own separate universe. But that's going to change with the new shows set to premiere on Disney+, Disney's upcoming streaming service. These shows will be produced by Feige and feature major characters and cast members from the movies. There's one about Bucky and Falcon, one about Loki, and another about Scarlet Witch and the Vision. In the last video, I talked about how the MCU, with its format of 3 feature films per year, isn't ideal for replicating the serialization of comic book storytelling, how the smaller stories that give the big events meaning are lost. But these shows, or at least the idea of them because nobody's actually seen them yet, could be the solution. Television, by nature, is much closer to the model of comic books than feature films. The installments are shorter, released closer together, and they add up to a much longer running time. There's more room for the short, self-contained stories you'll find in a single issue, that provide a breather from the massive spectacle to dig deeper into the characters. Unlike the movies of the MCU, these don't each have to be a massive event. And more importantly, they're focused on the characters who don't get the spotlight in the movies. I spoke before about how the movies skipped over the pivotal events of Bucky's life, asking us to care about him without taking the time to earn that. But with a 6-episode show featuring him as the lead character, that can finally be remedied. Some of the emotional impact of Infinity War required us to be invested in the love story between the Vision and Scarlet Witch, which apparently happened entirely off-screen after the events of Civil War. This sort of TV show is exactly what the MCU could have used a couple years ago. A smaller scale story devoted to those characters, getting us invested in a relationship that's going to be an essential part of the next film. This is much closer to how Marvel's comics work. If a new supporting character is a hit with fans, they'll often get a spin-off miniseries lasting 4 or 5 issues telling a smaller scale story. Disney Plus provides Marvel with a platform to instantly debut anything they want. There's no need to deal with movie theater chains or Netflix licensing deals. It's all self-contained, all straight to consumer. I realize that here I'm just speculating and offering suggestions, but I do honestly believe that for an entity as powerful and influential as Marvel, they should be taking further strides to advance how we consume stories in this medium. Personally, I think the most exciting thing they could do would be to experiment with shorter formats. The short film is something that has always seemed out of place in modern cinema. The only place most people ever see them is before Pixar movies. But Marvel could take short films, make them the equivalent of a single-issue story or a one-shot in the comics, and turn them into essential viewing for fans of the franchise. So imagine this had existed 4 years ago, and they devoted a 20-minute short film to the story of Bucky piecing together the remnants of his past. This would take care of that character development that was missing from Civil War and would make the film more resonant. I mean, back in the mid-2000s, Marvel published a really good one-shot comic called Winter Soldier: Winter Kills that filled in parts of his backstory. This would be the cinematic equivalent of something like that. From 2011 to 2014, Marvel would put out these bonus short films on their Blu-ray releases, affectionately known as one-shots. But these were always treated as bonus content, essentially longer versions of the post-credit scenes. They never really had any impact on the actual movies. So Marvel Studios already has a history with the short film format, but now they have an opportunity to do more with it. They can use them to introduce new characters and expand the universe without shoehorning extraneous plotlines into the main movies. They can incubate new directorial or writing talent before promoting them to feature film jobs. For the past decade, Feige and co. have done an impressive job replicating the intersecting ongoing stories of comic books within feature films. With Disney Plus, they might finally have the missing piece. A place to tell the smaller stories, the connective tissue between the major events. Here, Marvel has a chance to learn an important lesson. That not every story needs to be a $200 million blockbuster to matter. Last week, the deal that had been in the works for months was finalized, and 20th Century Fox officially became a part of the Walt Disney Corporation. Now, this has massive, very real consequences on the lives of Fox employees and the future of the film industry, and we should by no means ignore that. But it is also going to impact the superhero genre, which is what this video is about. To say Fox's superhero movies varied in quality is being generous, but in the poorly managed chaos, sometimes something unique would slip out, the most obvious examples being Logan and Deadpool. Beyond just the novelty of their R ratings, they stand apart from Marvel's movies in the way they allowed their filmmakers to offer their own distinct takes on the material, without having to tie into other movies or match an established tone. Movies like these feel like they'll be another casualty of the Disney deal, as the default mode for every Marvel superhero film is a massively budgeted event film designed to have 4-quadrant appeal and sell backpacks to kids. To again use the source material analogy, these movies are the big event comics, your Civil Wars and Infinity Gauntlets. There isn't room for anything smaller. But here, once again, Disney Plus could be the answer. Some of the most acclaimed Marvel comic books of recent years are smaller scale, self-contained stories that are more about people talking than massive battles that level cities. Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and David Aja is largely set around a single apartment building and features the title character raising a dog and protecting his neighbors from tracksuit-clad mobsters. The Vision by Tom King and Gabriel Walta is a tragic drama about a family of androids living in the suburbs. Both of these stories are about members of the Avengers, but neither is likely to become a blockbuster film that needs to appeal to 8-year-olds. If we're going to get a Logan within the MCU, or something like The Vision or Hawkeye, it's probably not going to be as a movie. Disney Plus gives Marvel the platform they need to tell those stories, where they can take risks and offer more freedom to filmmakers. The beauty of a shared universe like Marvel's is that smaller stories coexist side by side with sagas about the Avengers fighting space gods. And most importantly, this is the place we could finally get the story the MCU really needs: a spin-off about Luis, Dave, and Kurt from the Ant-Man movies.
Oh, we can handle it. We're professionals.
A thing that I see getting thrown around a lot is like, oh, superhero movies are to like this decade what the Western was to like the, like the 40s and 50s.
Musicals in the 30s, any of these things.
Right.
Right, yeah.
And that never seems to me quite like a really great comparison, because back then, 60% of the Westerns were not being overseen and made by the same group of people and all intersecting.
Yeah.
And so that genre was able to evolve a lot more. And so you look at, you get, The Searchers and you get High Noon and stuff like that, where it is like they're using the, the genre to like reflect back and comment on the genre.
Right.
And because of just like the nature of like, pretty much all the superhero movies we get now, they're going to be Marvel movies, where they have to be first and foremost Marvel movies and serve the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe, or they are DC movies, which are actually evolving in a really weird and fascinating way right now.
Yeah.
And there's very little room for anything else that's not part of those two. And a thing that I've been thinking about a lot, I think actually since last fall, you hosted a screening of Ang Lee's Hulk.
Yeah.
And
the weirdest superhero movie that will ever be made.
The weirdest one. And I was there, and I hadn't watched the movie since it was in theaters.
Yeah.
And I liked it more than you love it.
I love it. It's
like it.
Obviously a very strange film that is not for most people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I've been wondering, like, constantly since then, like, will we ever get an Ang Lee Hulk?
I don't think we will. And I think the word you use that's key is overseen. The difference between Westerns and superhero movies is that any superhero franchise, whether it's on TV, whether it's in film, whatever universe it is connected to, it's overseen by someone. These are viewed as like brand management properties. And Westerns, like, John Wayne starred in more movies than anyone ever. I mean, I think that's literally the stat that in terms of being the star of the film, he has more starring vehicles than anyone ever, because he did like 6 of them a year. And they were programmers, and sometimes the director would come in and sneak some stuff into them.
Right.
And put some really interesting craft into them, and cast really interesting actors. And they would get away with it because they said, if it's John Wayne and he's wearing a hat on the poster, we can sell it. That was the franchise. That was the thing. So directors could come in and use John Wayne as a vehicle to talk about American identity,
Right.
you know? But now there's so much oversight over these things that I don't think you'll ever get anything as individualistic as Ang Lee's Hulk again. They took the Hulk and said, what's the most interesting thing we could use the Hulk to say? In the same way that John Ford would look at John Wayne and say, what's the most interesting thing I can use John Wayne to say?
Right.
And now, you know, it's only gotten more and more the case where you have to make a very kind of a literal, sort of accessible and manageable interpretation of the character.
Right.
That can be quality controlled and, you know, sustainable.
Yeah.
And translatable and universal and all of that.
Right. It's like, it's funny now thinking back to superhero movies of the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Because the batting average these days is a lot higher.
Yeah.
There's a lot more good
Sure.
ones. I mean, like, there's,
Yeah.
in general, more of them are good than bad nowadays.
Right.
And back then, there were a lot of bad ones.
Right.
And but then you got cases like the Ang Lee Hulk, or honestly, it was 2005 that Christopher Nolan made a Batman movie,
Right.
and where they did their singular take.
Yeah.
And those seem way less likely now. But I feel like
And the take is the key word, you know?
Right.
Because even like, I'm very excited for Matt Reeves doing the new Batman.
Yeah.
But it feels like the whole approach is we want to make the core Batman from the comics you've never seen in a movie before. Whereas Ang Lee and Christopher Nolan both felt like they went, can I use these characters to say some other things?
Right.
Can I put my specific take on these characters into the world? And I don't know if we're ever going to get that again, where the main impetus isn't, you have to give me the perfect translation of this character from the comics,
Right.
and make the movie that the fans have in their mind.
Looking at how the movies link up to the comics, pretty much all of them that are made now are pretty much adaptations of like the core ongoing series,
Yeah.
like Marvel and DC Universe comics. But then in the comics, a lot of the stories that are often considered like the best, like superhero stories, are the Elseworld stories,
Yeah.
the out of continuity, your
What
dark,
if? Right.
the what ifs, your Dark Knight Returns is, your
Yeah.
All-Star Supermans, where
Right.
they don't have. They can kill the characters. They can be set in the future.
Right.
They can do their own thing. And I feel like the one of those that we've had was Logan,
Yes.
pretty much. Which, I mean, they got a Best Screenplay nomination at the Oscars.
Yeah.
And it was
And
very...
it's also, cut this out, but it's secretly a Western.
No way. What?
Go back and watch it.
And similarly, we're getting, later this year, Todd Phillips's Joker movie
Yeah.
starring Joaquin Phoenix that
Right.
is out of any continuity, that is just a filmmaker doing his take on a character
Right.
free of having to connect to any other movie.
It doesn't have to shake hands with anything else. And when that movie was announced, I thought, this is the worst idea I've ever heard.
Yep.
And it's now one of the movies I'm most excited to see this year.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because, and
whether or not it's good, it's like kind of what I want these films to be doing. I mean, it's sort of the double-edged sword of having an interconnected cinematic universe in this kind of way, is that there has to be a sort of compatibility, you know?
Right.
Across the line, and you can't have anyone really take a hard stance, throw out a hard take on anything. And the idea that it's just these two guys, you know, like Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix, along with their producers and their writers and the rest of the cast, Robert De Niro, just
I can't believe this movie exists.
spent 5 months, 6 months filming a Joker movie. And that's all they had to worry about, was that one movie they were making.
And-
Which is the same thing as when, you know, you write All-Star Superman. And you
Right.
go, my job here is they gave me this number of issues. I don't have to feed into anything else before. I can pick anything I want from what happened before me. I can throw anything I want out. Once it's done, it's done. And those stories are always the things that last. I mean, that have the most stickiness in the comic.
And I do wonder if this bizarre Todd Phillips Joker movie is potentially the future of like if this genre in film is going to evolve, is this going to be like the first step in that happening?
I mean, everything I hear points towards that being how DC wants to run things.
Right.
You know? I mean, Wonder Woman is very different from Aquaman.
Yeah, and I in an hour and 20 minutes, I'm gonna go see Shazam,
which is I've heard only great things.
Yeah,
and sounds completely different and totally incompatible from those two movies we just mentioned.
Right.
So all these things, you know, that make the DC universe kind of exciting now. Of James Wan can just do whatever insane underwater spectacle he wants to do, and he can make a weird horror movie off to the side.
They've basically just stopped worrying about keeping them all connected.
Right.
And so while Marvel's thing is they are all connected, everything matters because it's all one big ongoing story, the DC one seems to be just like who gives a shit? And if it does well, that means that audiences will have accepted the thing that studios were always afraid that they wouldn't be able to accept, which is just a different version of a character.
Right, so you go, what is the franchise here? This is the conversation that kind of excites me about what could happen. What is the franchise here? Is the franchise the ongoing series of adventures and mishaps and crazy crimes that Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, you know, lands upon? Or is the franchise finding interesting people to make one movie with characters that we all know?
Right.
Because the character is the star of the thing anyway. I mean, that's the brand, and you can attach exciting people to it. But I don't know if I need to live in a universe where someone is setting up a new 4-film Batman saga where one actor and one director is going to take us through that journey. I'd kind of be more into every 2 years there's a totally different Batman movie.
Right.
Because the star is Batman. The franchise is that Batman's going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be another version, another chapter of the last Batman I saw.
Right.
And, you know, I just keep on hearing that DC is like actively looking at things, all their sort of Elseworlds stories. You know, and trying to bring people in and go, what would you do if you only had to make one Superman movie? It's weird, you know, for all the talk we've had about, you know, is Marvel like TV? Is it more like the comics? Is it more like sports? Is it more like fast foods? Any of this? I think my major frustration, once again, with a franchise of 20 films, the majority of which I like a lot, is that they start to feel less like movies. And I don't need movies to feel exactly how a comic book universe feels, because the comic books exist.
Right.
What I want is something that is an intersection between everything I like about 2-hour narrative cinema and everything I like about superhero storytelling. I don't want the movies to start to feel like single issues.
Right.
Or, you know, different parts of a big event or anything like that. It's very cool when they're able to pull off the trick of also doing that. But the thing that I worry about is when we're losing the integrity of a movie on its own. And I want a little bit more out of that, out of superhero movies.
Yeah.
And I guess Marvel movies in particular. So that when you step back and look at the whole thing, it's impressive. But if you look at any one thing, that one thing is so satisfying on its own that I wouldn't need to see anything else.
Exactly.
And like, I think that's one of the reasons why Black Panther is the most successful movie they've ever made. Because I saw it with my 2 friends who don't like Marvel movies and had not seen a single other Marvel movie. And the only point in the film where I had to lean over to them and explain something was the end credits, where they just went, "Who is this guy?"
Right.
But for the rest of the film, they were just watching this one story with characters they got to know. They were introduced to at the beginning of that story. Didn't matter that Black Panther's been in Civil War. They knew everything they needed to know about this guy from the beginning of that movie, and it resolves its own narrative concerns.
Right. And the end isn't only satisfying because it seems like it's going to change the larger universe.
No, the end is satisfying because of the way that T'Challa has grown.
Right.
As a human being.
That's what we want.
That's what we want.
And so I think we've solved most of that.
Okay.
But I do
We've
want
solved it. We have solved it.
We've solved
definitively.
it. Look, I'm pretty sure that Kevin Feige is going to watch this video and take a lot of notes and be like, that's what I got to do.
These two guys have solved the most successful movie franchise of all time.
Exactly.
Something clearly was amiss.
Yeah.
They needed to fix it. And two guys who clearly just want to make their own superhero movies.
Exactly. And by the way, I want to make
Fixed it
something
for
very clear to the camera. I will gladly take back every single thing I've said in all of these videos if I ever get the chance to make one of these movies. I'll apologize publicly. I'll take it all back because Kevin, please let me make a movie. I think I do a good job.
This camera right here. Hi, Kevin Feige. I am willing to not only delete this video, but my entire social media presence in every episode of my podcast if you let me play Nightcrawler in the third casting of Nightcrawler when the X-Men become integrated into the MCU. Great.
Thanks so much for being here. We solved superhero movies.
Done. 6, done.
That's a wrap. I realize that I've devoted 3 videos to the lamest of all possible problems. I wish the superhero movies that I've been enjoying for years were a little bit better. It's always weird when your subculture goes mainstream. I spent middle and high school as the only kid around who read comic books, and I kept it a secret because back then it was so deeply uncool. I just wished that these things I loved would catch on and that everyone else would understand how great they were. And then it happened. Superheroes and comic books, or at least movies based on comic books, became mainstream. Now your mom knows who Thanos is. High school jocks are fans of Groot. It's weird. I'm never going to get back that initial excitement of seeing a live-action, comic-accurate Spider-Man swinging through New York, or seeing Nick Fury tell Tony Stark about the Avengers Initiative. For me, that thrill largely came from seeing these characters and stories I already loved recreated on screen. But to most audiences, this was their introduction, their primary source. And last year, while the world was losing its mind over the ending of Infinity War, my main thought was that it made me want to catch up on the older comics I hadn't read yet, to finally check out the Avengers runs from the 1970s by Roy Thomas and Roger Stern. It made me want to go back to the source. Over the past month I've spent making these videos, I thought I was talking about the limitations of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but what I was really dealing with were the limitations of feature films. As impressive as the MCU is, and the way they've adapted the structure of comic book storytelling, it's also highlighted the things comic books can do that movies can't. In a few months, one of my favorite writers, Jason Aaron, is going to reach the climax of the Thor story he's been writing since 2012, a huge, sprawling epic that has spanned almost 100 issues. That sort of thing, driven by one singular voice, is something the MCU will never be able to replicate. So I'm going to keep watching these movies, and if most of them are just good and not great, that's okay. If this is just another case of the book being better, you know, I can live with that. So I've been reading a lot of comic books lately. I obviously am a very big fan. If you're watching this video, you're probably at least somewhat interested in comics as well, or at least you like watching videos about them. Which brings me to our sponsor for this episode, CuriosityStream. It's a streaming service dedicated to nonfiction and documentaries. One of their titles that I think is worth checking out is Hergé, In the Shadow of Tintin, about the life of the man who made some of the best comic books of all time. The Tintin comics, obviously. Or if you want to watch something else instead, well, they've got over 2,400 other documentaries to choose from. A subscription is only $2.99 per month, but you can get your first 31 days totally free if you sign up at curiositystream.com/Patrick H. Willems and use the promo code Patrick H. Willems. They have plenty of stuff to keep you busy until my next video is out in a couple of weeks, so go sign up now. But the last thing I want to ask you, can you tell me about season 2 of The Tick and why everyone watching this video should watch that?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're watching this video, you're probably someone who overthinks superhero media. And The Tick is the show for those people. It's also got a lot of funny jokes. We fight a giant lobster monster. This season, if you've watched season 1, is about sort of dealing with the bureaucracy of a S.H.I.E.L.D. type agency, which I think is really funny. It's like 10 episodes about how difficult it is to file all the paperwork necessary to be a superhero within the system.
So we all agree that's what Winter Soldier was missing.
Paperwork.
And now we're gonna get it.
And people think I'm joking when I say this. It's so much paperwork. When people ask me what the most difficult part of filming season 2 was, and I herniated a disc in my back filming season 2, without fail, the most difficult part was memorizing dialogue about different forms. Which forms I had filed and which ones I hadn't.
I was already looking forward to this, and now I'm so much more excited.
Paperwork heavy.
When and where can people see it?
April 5th. All 10 episodes. All at once. Everywhere in the world.
On
Amazon Prime exclusively.
Yes.
Wait, but I'm not an Amazon Video subscriber. If you're a Prime subscriber, you got video.
Yeah.
You already got it, and season 1 is streaming now.
Greetings, viewers of the multiverse. I'm Rachel.
I'm Scott.
And I'm the guy who made this video.
And we are the Infinity Podcast, a show that takes us down the road from Infinity War into infinity with an infinite number
I think
of...
we have to explain it faster.
Cool.
Basically, if you like this video, you will really like this podcast. We're talking everything MCU related. So whether the Incredible Hulk is Edward Norton's Hudson Hawk, or if Hawkeye had half his hair snapped away.
But we use the MCU to discuss pop culture at large, which includes Dungeons & Dragons tangents, our takes on Carly Rae Jepsen.
So, subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you real soon.
Scott, it's a podcast.
You'll hear us real shortly.
Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for watching, and we did it. We got through this whole massive project. This thing has been on my mind for pretty much a year now. That's how long it took to kind of figure out what I wanted to say about Marvel movies. And I am really relieved that we got through the whole thing. A few things I want to mention. First of all, thank you so much to Griffin Newman for appearing in this video. Guys, go watch The Tick on Amazon. It's good. Season 2, as we said, comes out April 5th. And also listen to his podcast, Blank Check with Griffin and David, because if you like these videos, you'll also like that. A recommendation that I want to give, my friend, film critic Siddhant Adlaka, is writing a series for Slash Film in which he is reviewing and revisiting every single film in the MCU. If you liked these videos but wished I had taken the time to go into detail on every specific movie, then you will really enjoy this. He's doing great writing over there. Obviously, you already saw a promo for the Infinity Podcast, so I don't need to talk about that more. Follow me on all the social media platforms. If you want to support us on Patreon, that would be great. And we'll be back soon with a new video that will not be about Marvel movies. I promise.